From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And ahead today, K-State's Dan O'Brien commenting this week on the factors that he thinks will keep wheat prices moving in a positive direction. And Dan will go over his latest price probability projections for grain sorghum during his weekly segment on the grain market trends. Then another of the featured speakers at that 2018 Nitrogen Use Efficiency Conference hosted this week by K-State. Out of Oklahoma State University, Brian Arnall will talk about his research into wheat plant genetics as a pathway toward more efficient use of nitrogen in wheat production. And awaiting with her update on the Kansas agricultural weather scene, K-State's Mary Knapp. Plus more straight ahead on this Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
This is Agriculture Today. Thanks for being along with us as we venture into the grain market trends once again with our regular Friday guest, grain market economist Dan O'Brien of K-State Research and Extension from his office in Colby. Well, when you compare the grain trades, the wheat market is the relative picture of health, and this continues to really impress folks, if nothing else, Dan.
Yes, when you look across the lead contracts in the futures realms that we watch, again, corn futures, soybean futures, and hard red winter wheat futures, at least here in Kansas. Again, corn closed yesterday, September corn about 366 3/4, better than what it could have been and was earlier, closer to, 350 or below. Soybeans at 882, and of course, we're more used to 9.5 to 10s to 11s, and but 882, it could be worse, but not as good as we want. And then we look at the September wheat contract. Gosh, it's 569 and a quarter, and how'd that happen? Well, of course, we've had some problems of our own, but when you look at what happened yesterday in the market, in essence, we traded up to as high as $6 for wheat, and we had been at about $4.70 during the first part to middle of July. So we've gained, on yesterday's close of 569 from 470, gained about $1. And we've got great concerns in the wheat trade about dryness in Europe, and also dry conditions in eastern Australia, and part of their, important part of their wheat production area. The type of news releases that come out of the Black Sea region when they're short, basically saying either the Ukrainian or Russian government that no, we're not going to limit exports. We're going to let the market take care of itself. When we'll see what they actually do, but you have concerns in at least these 3 major production areas that have led the wheat market to change dramatically from the pessimism that we'd seen for a good part of the last year or so. That plus our own production problems and shorter hard red winter wheat crop. So add all those together. The challenging part in this is that as those factors are pointing towards higher U.S. wheat exports to fill in the gap on the export markets, if that's going to take place, we haven't seen it yet in actual either forward purchases or shipments. So here we have a situation in terms of world stocks that should be pointing towards stronger business for the U.S. on the export market side, but we haven't seen any of the actual buying occur yet. So, we've seen some, but it's about the same pace of 10, 12, 15, 16 million bushels per week that's shipped out, and we'd be expecting to see double that or more in the better days of wheat shipments that we've seen in the past. So that's really the situation that we're in. We have seen around the state really pretty strong basis levels. And of course, we've been talking about this, wondering how do you separate out short crop versus protein, influences on that. But Northwest Kansas, wheat basis and Cornerstone Ag over the last several weeks gained about 50 or 60 cents. Southwest Kansas, again, Garden City Co-op. Again, these are some of the main elevators in those areas. Again, strong gains of about the same amount. Really strong performance and backed off just a little bit in the last couple, 2-3 weeks in Salina and some of their locations. In Hutchinson area, one of the co-ops in that area has had some volatility, but generally has increased about 50 cents or so, again, with some ups and downs. So what the basis signals we're getting in our cash markets are that, gosh, we should be seeing some business, or we are seeing some business, we should be seeing more. So we're really just kind of waiting for the confirmation to come in terms of actual purchases at our shores to perhaps to hold up the current bids and maybe even to drive them higher, depending on what the final outcome is in Europe and the Black Sea region.
Right. And the latest USDA numbers tell us that overall coarse grain stocks, world stocks now, are at a noticeable low level, and that could allow some underpinning for the corn and grain sorghum trades, could it not?
Yes, as the USDA's projected supply-demand out into the 2018-19 marketing year again, and that starts September 1, so it's just about upon us. They're projecting the lowest world coarse grain percent stocks use basically in our recorded export-oriented history, and that's going back to 1973-74. So with that number put out there, you ask, well, what's keeping the market from really jumping higher? Well, a good amount of that assumption has to do with what actually happens, what will happen in South America with the crop that'll be harvested next May, June, July, August. But expectations are that there'll be a lot of soybean acres in that part of the world, given what's happened with trade disputes, et cetera, and their high prices domestically. So right now the projections are for the lowest world aggregate percent stocks to use that we have in recorded modern history. And even if you back China out of that, given their high level of domestic stock storage, if you take them out of the equation, you're still looking at tight enough stocks to use that were rivaling or getting close to what happened in 2012-13. So if these projections come true, then feed grain prices, grain, sorghum, corn are really underpriced. So it's not here yet. It's anticipation of what will happen with our final harvest this fall and the harvest next spring, but with what's projected right now, and you look at historic relationships, it sure looks like there would be room for feed grain prices to move strongly higher.
And your updated outlook on grain sorghum prices in the form of your price probability projections, what have you there? Is there some encouragement, Dan?
Well, with what the USDA has projected for grain sorghum, they're forecasting a price of about $3.60 for a U.S. average price for the 2018-19 marketing year. Again, that'd be this next one coming. You could have a number of things that could happen. If we end up and have more supply of grain sorghum than thought, if we sort of overwhelm its usage, well, then we'd see some weakening of grain sorghum prices, but not that much. 10, 15 cents probably, but it wouldn't be disastrous. Probably the thing that we're looking at even more would be the possibility that the strong trends in ethanol usage for grain sorghum would continue, and that we'd see some strength continuing in feed residual usage. If that happens, then you'd see this crowding out effect that happens in the grain market possibly come into play. In essence, if we have strong exports, if we see a resuming of what happened over the last 12, 18 months with Chinese imports of U.S. exports of grain sorghum, then the usage runs toward or is crowded toward the grain sorghum side, and we just don't have as much grain sorghum available to use for feed usage or for ethanol use. But if we kind of remain at this moderate to low phase of grain sorghum export usage, then the low price of grain sorghum makes it an attractive product to use for livestock feeders, for ethanol plants, etc. And if we go great guns in those areas, particularly on the ethanol side, well, you end up with some higher prices. In fact, there's a cash price at a Kansas ethanol plant for grain sorghum at $3.95, and top price for corn is $4. So we've got $3.95 to $4 corn and grain sorghum here in Kansas right now, but it's at the ethanol plants. So I think whatever we do going forward will be probably dependent on whether we resume exports of grain sorghum with the trade situation resolved down the road, if that happens, then again, we'll push a lot of our supply, I wouldn't say all of it, but a good amount of our supply towards the export side because, gosh, that's the high-price option. If not, it opens the door for these other uses to come in and jump higher, and that would be, in particular, the ethanol side of the equation, with some strength probably also coming in the livestock feeding arena as well.
All right, and concluding on the soybean front, you point particularly this week, Dan, to what you call the disparate trends in soybean basis in Kansas.
Yeah, and when you look at, again, it's kind of the same four communities we were looking at before, Colby, Garden City, Salina, and Hutchinson, you see basis for soybeans moving somewhat higher in the Colby location, at the Garden City location, decent but not trending upward, sort of sideways over the last month and a half. You see the trend in Salina very much sideways. The trend in Hutchinson moving higher. So you've got really some disparity, and probably just depends on how exports are coming into play at different elevators in those various communities, et cetera. But just thought-provoking to see that. I would say that for all that has happened, the exports of U.S. soybeans are holding up better than many would have expected. And it has to do, I think, with this trading around, the reshuffling of chairs in terms of who's buying what from who, as China has gone full bore into buying soybeans from South America and mainly from Brazil, driving the price up there and having other buyers then come back to the U.S. and claiming that as their own, at least here in the short run.
Well, in about 2 weeks from today, Dan will have his updated outlook on the grain markets in total featured at the Risk and Profit Conference at K-State. We'd put in a plug for that as yet another reason to attend that event on the 16th and 17th of August here in Manhattan. So look forward to that, and we will look forward to hearing from you again right here next Friday, Dan. Many thanks to you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Grain market analysis and comment from Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Agriculture Today returns now on the K-State Radio Network, and yet more of the information that was shared with the audience at the 2018 Nitrogen Use Efficiency Conference hosted by K-State, whereby scientists and specialists from all around the Midwest and the Central Plains gathered to share their findings in this general area of improving nitrogen use efficiency and management. Our guest now had a different take in his presentation on how this whole goal of NUE could be approached, and that is through crop breeding, specifically wheat. He is Brian Arnall, Precision Nutrient Management Specialist with Oklahoma State University Extension. We've had occasion to visit with him before, but this is something apart from what was shared at this conference, where multiple perspectives were talked about considering nitrogen use efficiency. The genetic side rarely gets attention in this area.
Yeah, especially with this group, we're a bunch of soil scientists and cropping system specialists, so we're very mechanistic about how do we do better on nitrogen. I've been lucky at Oklahoma State to work with our breeder, Brett Carver, on a new look at it through a grant that we received several years ago to improve NUE. He started seeing the opportunity and the value of actually having at least one of his breeder blocks under extreme nitrogen limitations and seeing the genetic variability of his own lines and others under that stress. And so from that work in far southwest Oklahoma, A few lines have been identified that have really good yield potential capabilities under extreme stress, but not just the yield. One of the focuses of the project has been quality, protein and baking and milling. So over the years, we've identified a few lines that under extreme stress will produce better than maybe the current varieties, and at the same point produce a high protein and high baking and milling characteristics. And now we're moving from the breeder blocks into more of a large-scale evaluation to see how do these lines perform outside of the one location where the screening is occurring.
How, Brian, within all of this, then, do you quantify nitrogen efficiency and the stressor of having less than optimum nitrogen available to the wheat?
So we're really looking at, and there's multiple alternatives. You could look at in uptake and in efficiency. When it comes down to it, I'm looking at the pounds of nitrogen put into the crop and the pounds removed in a quality product. And so it's really a yield-based evaluation. What we'd seen with some of the lines we're looking at, one of the numbered lines is 13209, that under extreme stress in the southwest, we would see in upwards of 20% increase in yield over some of the other varieties.
So you're not really setting a target nitrogen usage per se. You're just gauging this on how efficient the crop is in productivity.
In any season, nitrogen use efficiency has a wide range. So we don't have a target point. It's just better. We're trying to improve upon and produce a good product.
So, as you've gone about this, you've identified one line anyway that more or less meets this objective of being more efficient in its end use?
Yeah, we have taken a numbered line 13209 to a more agronomic scale. We don't know if it's going to be released. That's up to the wheat improvement team, but we've evaluated a larger area, and it's maintaining good yields, not the highest, but it's maintaining good yields and exceptional quality across the board.
Did you, within this work, look at the economic component at all in terms of what one might save in nitrogen applications? Because the money associated with wheat production is pretty tight, as you're well aware.
Right now, we're actually not looking to cut nitrogen. This is not something we want to say do less with, but it's one of those that we want to say if we utilize this variety, if nitrogen stresses occur, we can push more. We're also looking at the specialty market. This could have a great fit in an organic system where we're under low management. 13209 has good disease package, and so something that can handle an environment with lower input and still have very high quality output is another highlight of this line.
But the quality of this line is not to be questioned, it sounds. It's really right up there.
Yeah, the quality's been exceptional, and that's what first brought it out, is that under 20% nitrogen, optimum nitrogen, it was still producing very high quality, both protein and baking and milling.
Now, you have been visiting with colleagues and certainly from other parts of the area and involved in other crops, and you've been more or less promoting this idea of looking harder at genetics within the realm of nitrogen use efficiency, and it really hasn't been a high priority. Do you think this might shift based on things that you're finding and others?
I think it is. It depends on where you're coming from. I think in wheat we have the greatest opportunity because it's still a land grant based. Our breeders are still based here, and I've seen some of the industry, even in the wheat group, looking into beyond the land grant breeders. So I think in wheat, absolutely. I don't know with corn and some of the others because of the rapid turnover. I know it's looked at, but I don't know how far into that.
But it may be on the horizon. That's the point here.
It'll be on the horizon. You'll see things from Pioneer and others that kind of delve into that.
Now, genetic answers to improving nitrogen efficiency, but one aspect of it, producers, in the case of wheat here, need to keep in mind and well in mind the other approaches to efficiency and using the full suite of technologies, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I try to stress when I talk about what we're doing genetically, is that doesn't mean you can take the agronomics and the nutrient management out of it. It's just as important. And what we're doing at Oklahoma is, in the long run, I hope to combine genetic by practice and agronomy, stretching our nitrogen application out to where we not only maximize yield but quality with our fertilizer management and our genetics. So the end game is the highest quality product we can produce.
For the here and now, as the genetic side comes around in the next few years, whatever it takes, what do you press to producers in as far as them individually achieving their best nitrogen management?
So, best nitrogen management is the movement away from all up front, is the delay. Some of the work we've got going on in Oklahoma over the last 2 years showed the capabilities and benefits of delaying nitrogen much beyond even what I thought was agronomically possible, but we're seeing delaying into March for Oklahoma. And so we're past hollow stem being some of the most effective, efficient fertilization points. And it's because if you think about the wheat crop, after that hollow stem is when it really starts growing exponentially. And so if you time your application closer to that, so if you're already a split but you do some at pre and some in the fall, moving it to some in pre to a spring application, or change your percentage of nitrogen from heavy pre to more spring and even late spring. The guys that do the best, that have the best NUE and the best quality, are in a 3-pass system now where they do it for the grain only for little nitrogen up front. They look at a fall, late fall, early spring application depending on environment. If everything is good and growing well at that point, they hit it then. And then look at a late March application as a top-off. And so when environment is still dictating that our yield and our quality and everything's going, we do a third shot. And it allows more opportunity to make in-season decisions based upon rainfall and environment.
This is as opposed to the random during the winter top dress.
Yeah, so the winter top dress, it is mechanically efficient because there's little going on then. But that's not when the crop truly needs the nitrogen. And in our environments, 1 year will be extremely wet and 1 year will be extremely dry. And so I like to be much more reactive on my nitrogen management, especially in dryland production, than just safe as the upfront.
Very good. One last thing, Brian. You've absorbed all of this information at this conference. It's been quite a gathering, and a lot has been exchanged here. What's your main takeaway from it? What did you find most intriguing?
So when it comes to this, I've been coming to this conference since 2003. I've been from the very beginning in on these meetings. One takeaway that I actually stress to the students is if you look into the people in this room, the scientists in this room, they represent 70 to 80% of the scientific material on nitrogen in the United States. So this is the greatest gathering of nitrogen specialists. One of the things that I stress upon the people that you take home is there is no easy answer with nitrogen. It's too dynamic. It's too weather and regionally dependent. So it's actually the move to more local information to make those decisions right and moving away from the grandiose, 2 pounds of N per bushel wheat or 1.2 pounds of N per bushel corn yield goal. It's that let's take weather and environment. And so the introduction of weather, climate, and soils into that management decision is the greatest takeaway.
It's more about intense management in the end.
Mm-hmm. It's data keeping, it's planning, and really letting the environment tell you what you need.
Glad you could be a part of it and appreciate you taking a few moments from the conference to pass along the message that you shared with the attendees. Best of luck. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
He's Brian Arnall, and he is a precision nutrient management specialist with the Extension Service out of Oklahoma State University. He talked about achieving high nitrogen use efficiency in wheat production through genetics at the 2018 Nitrogen Use Efficiency Conference, which took place here at K-State this week. And you're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Now this break. When we come back, today's agricultural news headlines, the Kansas wheat scoop for this week, and Mary Knapp on Kansas agricultural weather, still ahead here on the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're listening to Agriculture Today from the campus of Kansas State University. And welcome back. Eric Atkinson here with today's agricultural news headlines for you in brief. These courtesy in part of DTN. Well, President Trump took to Twitter yesterday, jumping into the debate on the next farm bill, as both chambers now have named their conferees to iron out the differences between the two bills. The tweet read, "When the House and Senate meet on the very important farm bill, hopefully they will be able to leave the work requirements for food stamps provision that the House approved." That's how the tweet read. Once again, the work requirements referenced by the president in the House version, but not the Senate plan. Further, the president also hinted the Senate needs to get rid of the filibuster rule that requires 60 votes to overcome any filibuster. The Senate Farm Bill passed, by the way, 86-11. The Senate did turn back the effort to alter the work requirements during the floor consideration of the bill in a 30-68 vote, and expectations are there would not be close to 60 votes if the House version of the language was included in the final package. Plus, it's not clear that the chamber could produce enough Republican votes to clear the package with that House language. While the war of words continues between the U.S. and China, a senior Trump administration official said they were communicating with Beijing about the potential for a negotiated settlement over the trade issues, but did not have any dates for a meeting to announce. Some observers, including U.S. lawmakers, want direct talks between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, but the two leaders have no scheduled meetings until November, when they will both be at regional meetings. While no formal talks have been scheduled, the two countries remain in constant communication about the possibility, according to senior administration officials, with the president remaining open to those conversations, they say. And they say they do have this throughout the process, that according to a senior administration official talking to reporters during a briefing on the president's latest plan to ratchet up trade pressure on Beijing. Agricultural land values, farm production expenditures, and cash rents are all subjects of new USDA reports. The USDA's Rod Bain has more.
A trio of USDA reports out Thursday captured snapshots of ag land values, farm production expenditures, and cash rents. First, with land values.
Farm real estate values, which includes the value of all the land and the buildings on farms, were up from 2017 values.
Up $60 an acre year over year, according to Agriculture Department Deputy Chief Economist Warren Preston. Yet also up in 2017.
Farm production expenditures in the U.S. are estimated at almost $360 billion for 2017, and that's up from almost $345 billion in 2016.
With the largest expenditure increase being feed, up over 15% from the previous year. Meanwhile, for cash rents,
surprisingly, very little movement. Overall, cropland cash rents increased just $1 per acre from $137 per acre last year up to $138 per acre for all acreage in 2018.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And as part of those reports, the USDA's latest numbers on Kansas farm real estate value and cash rents. The real estate value in the state for farms decreasing from 2017. Farm real estate value for 2018 in the state averaging $1,800 per acre. That's down $50 per acre, or 3% from the previous year. Cropland value increasing 2% from last year to $2,010 per acre. Dryland cropland at $1,910 per acre. Irrigated cropland value at $2,900 per acre. And pasture land at $1,280 per acre, according to these new numbers from the USDA. Begun in the 1970s, the IGP Institute here at K-State has reached thousands of international grain customers and users with its educational outreach, introducing them to information that will encourage them to purchase U.S.-produced grains. And the program's success is well documented as it continues to grow. Jordan Hildebrand offers an update on this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Jordan?
Serving as a global staple food crop for more than 8,000 years, wheat continues to be one of the top 3 grain commodities for trade from the United States, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Helping to create that demand for U.S. and Kansas wheat is the IGP Institute. Through their flour milling and grain processing trainings, IGP faculty feature wheat's benefits to international participants. Sean Teeley, IGP Institute Interim Associate Director, said, "We have seen great value in teaching wheat quality and other milling practices to people who come to the IGP Institute. Not only do we provide awareness to the consistently superior Kansas and U.S. wheat quality, we also help participants understand how to relate the quality requirements into their buying standards to fully meet the expectations of millers and bakers." Science led by the researchers at the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center advances wheat genetics to provide quality wheat the farmers want to grow, as well as meets the needs of millers and bakers in the U.S. and other parts of the world. In 2017, the IGP Institute held 14 courses for 144 participants representing 25 countries. These trainings are possible because of the funding support given by the Kansas Wheat Commission and other state commodity groups. Marcia Boswell, Director of Communications at the Kansas Wheat Commission, said, "Most people know that we fund research projects focusing on new variety development, management practices, and more. Another large portion of our funding is focused on international market development, a mission that positions us as great partners with the IGP Institute. This grower-funded, grower-governed organization helps secure the future of wheat grown in Kansas in the global market. By international trade, research, export system studies, and continually improving varieties of wheat producers in Kansas can continue to enhance their profits and productivity for the grain commodity." Boswell adds, "Through U.S. Wheat Associates and other groups, we are able to bring in trade teams, such as the Nigerian trade team that is brought to the IGP Institute annually, and offer education to them during harvest about Kansas wheat production." Boswell explained that Nigeria is a huge market for Kansas wheat, and by collaborating with IGP, they give these international groups hands-on experiences along with the information that they learn from instruction. The faculty and staff at the IGP Institute offer many educational training courses in flour milling and grain processing to provide valuable knowledge to both domestic and international groups. Reflecting on the IGP Institute and Kansas Wheat Commission partnership, Boswell says, "It's a great opportunity to get to work with the IGP Institute, and especially to know that IGP is out there working for Kansas farmers, trying to open up markets and give those prospective buyers the information that they need." For Kansas Wheat, this is Jordan Hildebrand.
Thanks, Jordan. Wetter than normal latter part of August. We'll talk about it with K-State's Mary Knapp next on Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Closing out this Agriculture Today, we'll get into the Kansas agricultural weather update for you now, as alongside is Mary Knapp, climatologist, K-State Research and Extension, with the very latest from the Weather Data Library here at the university. And you do have your numbers for the month of July in hand, Mary. It was a hot month, but did not exceed the norm by all that much, you say.
Right. We were about 0.4 of a degree warmer than normal statewide, which is, again, not significant in its departure. In fact, it falls right in the middle of the pack, a little bit on the cool side of the middle of the pack, if you will. But again, the distribution on the temperatures was a little bit skewed. Two of the western divisions, the northwest and the southwest, were actually about 0.5 degree cooler than normal. There was also a cool area in north central and south central. Central divisions were, again, slightly on the warm side, but the really big departure, and it wasn't very big, were in the eastern divisions. They were all 1 degree or more warmer than normal, but not much beyond 1 degree warmer than normal, so not really remarkably different from what our typical July would be. I think what was really interesting on July was the split personality of the month. We started out the month very hot and dry, and then we switched into a cool, wet period to end the month. The western divisions were much more favored in the wet than the east, but again, that split pattern was probably the most noteworthy part of July.
And collectively, on the moisture side, it was an average July or a little bit more so?
Actually, it was a little bit wetter than normal for July. Statewide, we averaged 3.94 inches, and that's 110% of normal, so a little bit on the wet side on that. The big winner was the Southwest. They averaged 5.66 inches, which is 205% of normal.
Wow.
What's really interesting on that Southwest is that there were a couple of very large rains in there. Garden City got hit with some enormous ones. But on that last week in July, when Garden City saw its heavy rain, there were 88 reporting stations with over 2 inches of rain in that Southwest division. So
it was a uniform event.
It was not necessarily a uniform, but it was a widespread beneficial rain event, which is not always the case when you're looking at this divisional average. That was 88 out of 106 reports that were 2 inches or more.
Wow.
And so, again, very wide, generous rains in that Southwest division. In contrast, you get into the Northeastern division, and they averaged 3.05 inches, which is 69% of normal, but we're going, we've got places in the Kansas River Valley where their monthly total for July was less than an inch.
Which is highly abnormal.
Yeah, highly abnormal. And again, that's one reason why we have the swap in the drought monitor that we currently are seeing.
And right to that, what it's telling us, the drought has pushed east. We're aware of that. And have we seen intensification in various areas?
We have seen a little bit. There's been some expansion in the abnormally dry in the north central, where they've started to have a longer period since their last beneficial rains. The moderate and severe drought has expanded up into the northeastern corner, so that Leavenworth, Donovan, Atchison, Brown County area has intensified. The extreme drought has expanded along the Kansas River Valley and south of that, again, in the areas where it really missed out on the rains. There hasn't been much expansion in the exceptional drought. That's the absolute worst category. There were some fairly decent rains in the last week on the western edges of that area, and so there wasn't much in the intensification of that. But again, we're seeing a slight creep in the worst categories, balanced by some major improvements in the west.
Well then, let's look ahead to this month of August, and beginning with this next week, once more very spare chances of rainfall, it sounds.
Right, and what we're looking at in this next week is there are chances just about every day, but the chances are in the 20 to 30% range. What we're looking at from that is, again, isolated pop-up thunderstorms. Somebody may get it, but the neighbors won't. That pattern is likely to continue. The 8 to 14-day outlook is a little bit more optimistic than it was just yesterday, in that the area of abnormally dry conditions or below normal precipitation is pulled a little bit further north, and they're calling for equal chances for above or below normal from the central part to the southern part of Kansas. How that will actually verify is still up in the air. When I looked at the quantitative precip forecast, which looks at how much moisture we might squeeze out of the system, the greatest chances were along the edges of the state, and I'm talking Kansas-Colorado border, Kansas-Nebraska border, maybe a little bit along the Kansas-Missouri border, and those areas might see as much as an inch, but you stretch much more than 10 or 15 miles from the border, and you're looking at quickly dropping down to a half an inch to a quarter of an inch, which is still less than what we would typically expect for a week's precip in Kansas. Not any encouragement for substantial rains in the most drought-stricken regions.
However, the corner may be turned the latter part of the month, you say, according to the outlook?
Right. They have an experimental forecast product that looks out into a 2 to 4 week period, which would put us to the middle of August, towards the end of August. And that pattern is calling for cooler than normal conditions and wetter than normal statewide. And that basically covers everything from the Front Range of the Rockies all the way over into the mid-Ohio River Valley. It would be very nice if that would actually materialize, getting some subsoil moisture built up before the winter wheat planting, which is coming up not too far in the future. But again, we'll have to see how that actually plays out. At this point, there's not really much to change the pattern that we're currently embedded in.
As always, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Mary Knapp, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension. We appreciate you tuning in as always, and please be back with us on Monday, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good weekend for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.